Hello and welcome to the Business Growth Lab. I'm your host, Izzy Nalley, and in this series, we are talking about grit. Grit in a different way, not the military, ignore your emotions and push anybody out of the way that you need to and go for the goal, but really this almost spiritual of it in this self-development that happens in pushing past the fear, pushing past the doubt, and allowing yourself to really open up to a new and better way of being you. And of course, we're talking to business owners. So today, this beautiful couplepreneur, which I think for so many of us women, we're like, oh, that would be amazing without the burnout of working with my husband or partner. But focusing on also building wealth. And I think that's so important to hear because creating family wealth really does take both partners to do that. And that you made a business out of that after coming out of the corporate world. And you mentioned the burnout from corporate world. Jessilyn, tell us more about where were you at and this burnout and then this push to find something and do something different.
Yes, thank you. So in 2019 is when I actually had the burnout. I was working so many hours, and there's a whole space in there where I had no idea what my kids were even doing. Like, my husband was managing, my in-laws were helping out, and I'm hearing stories going, when did you go bowling for the first time? Where was I? And through that contract, I ended up with not listening to my body. Obviously, I knew people were like, wow, you've really lost weight, like too much weight. I'm like, oh, no, I'm good, right? And my hair was falling out, and I was so stressed, and I just wasn't listening to my body, and finally just boom, my body shut me down. It was having none of it. And that's the first time I ever experienced in my early 40s migraines. And I mean, I'd heard about them, but I never had them. And mine were the aura. So I couldn't have noise, I couldn't have smells, I couldn't have lights. And sitting there, my poor kids are like trying to color in the dark because the lights were giving me such severe pain and nausea. And I was pretty much house ridden for 2 months trying to figure out, because I didn't even know what it was at the time, what was going on. Am I going to survive this? Is this going to get worse? What triggered it? And through there, after I recovered, let's put that loosely, recovered, because it takes more than just 2 months. Now my body's on like standby. Every time I do something too stressful, it's like, suddenly turn the lights out, kid, like you're done. But after that, I went through and, okay, well, was it worth it? I was finally making incredible money, which was my original goal, even though my husband had been telling me for years to stop and smell the roses. And I'm like, no one's got time for that, honey. I just got to make money. He's like, but for what? I'm like, I just need to be a millionaire. I just, so we can do what we want. And then I reached these incredible funds and I went, well, that's that. What now? And I was like, oh, this isn't what life's about. And so I had to really evaluate, well, what did I want in life? And one of the programs I ended up taking in 2020, 2021, at one of the exercises, and I sometimes tell women to try this exercise. It's kind of weird, but it can really put perspective for you. And it was like, imagine you're standing at the back of the room of your celebration of life.
Mm-hmm.
What are people saying about you? And that's when I did it. I did it twice over probably several months. And I'm like, oh, nope. I'm not ready to go, right? Like, there's always that, if you're ready to go tomorrow, if something happened, have you done everything? Like, no. I'm here to make a change. I'm here to make an impact and help people build their wealth so they can live a life they love. And then it took me some time to really understand what that meant. And then how do I shift to do that? And that's when my husband and I decided, like, okay, let's launch our company, Life by Design, where we help couples build their wealth. And we start like with the mindset first, because we didn't start with the mindset first. We jumped right in. Let's do real estate on top of our corporate careers, on top of having kids, and let's build a business. Why not, right? And so now we're like, okay, let's start with the mindset and shift it, because I had to do that. I came from no money. I grew up with no money. And so I had that scarcity mentality for decades. That's all I knew. And then once I dug in and learned that there's abundance everywhere, it's an incredible perspective to have. And then from shifting from the scarcity to the abundance, because everyone deserves to have whatever they want in life. And I think what they don't understand is that if I have more, that means there's less for others. And that's not true.
Yes.
There's so much money out there that if you just look at what's available and you start reaching out, it becomes abundant. And so we work with people on their mindset first, and then we shift in to make sure they're on the same page as a couple, their values. That's foundational. Then from there, we go into the plan. Okay, so what does it look like for you and your family? What kind of wealth do you want to have? Is it early retirement? Is it a legacy for your family? A legacy to give back? I know so many women who want to give back. And said, ladies, giving back is an incredible feeling. But think about signing, handing over a $20 or $100 bill versus you could sign a check for $1,000 or $5,000. Now that's impactful giving back. And when I put that into perspective, I'm like, oh, but you can't do that if you don't have the abundance yourself.
Yes, I agree. And yeah, how great would that feel to be like, I really love what this charity is doing. And I see that it's not just me volunteering more hours. Like they genuinely need money to make this happen. And to be able to write over maybe even a $5,000 check and to hand that over. Could you imagine how empowering that would feel for you yourself, but also like how much gratitude these organizations would feel because they survive based on people having wealth, people having abundance so that they can give and to be able to show up and make an impact in your community. I mean, how amazing would that be?
Exactly.
So for that, and I can only imagine the things that you all get to do with people, and I imagine you probably work with lots of couples as well, and having that shift. And I imagine you probably see this shift for a lot of people when they're just like, I'm done. I've been through the depths of despair. I'm ready to change. I'm ready to change how I think. I'm ready to change my habits. Help me figure out what my mindset needs to be. Like, help me figure out how to make good choices. And I think that is a pivotal point in grit, that to be able to reframe, to be able to ask for help. So tell me about like what was your all's process of finding this different way of doing things, as much as how you are helping other people do that too.
I think you raised a really good point. It's assessing where you are and who you are. Right? And then being able to ask for help. That was one thing I didn't do well, if at all, until I learned that I just couldn't keep going at the pace I was going and growing the way I wanted to. And then, like for my husband and I who work together, that took some time to figure out our dynamic.
I'm sure.
Because we're very different personalities. And thankfully, like I'm that visionary, just go, like I'm out the plane without the parachute. He'll be throwing it at me kind of a thing, like, honey, you're gonna need this to land. He's more the ops, the get it in to process. This is how long it's gonna take, Jess. Did you expect that? I'm like, no, so it's not tomorrow. Right. So we had to really figure out that he says I'm the hare and he's the turtle. Right. So I'm really creative and I can see the big picture and how things can come together, but I'm not the small detail where it's like, oh, we need to do this, this, and this to make it work. But we weren't always like that. It was kind of, we both ran out the gate thinking we're both the CEO. We both got to do everything. And it took some time to really jive and figure out like, no, let's slow down and really come together with what do we like doing, because that makes a huge difference. What are we good at and what can we outsource? And for him to kind of accept that I'm the CEO, that took him time as well, because he thought he had to be the CEO, but he openly knows that he doesn't see the big picture. That's just not who his personality is. And he doesn't see how all the pieces can come together. but throw it at me and I'll have it done in seconds. I love that kind of stuff, right? But then for me to just also be okay with, here you go, honey. Here's the project. Here's what I envision. You put the pieces in there. You get the teams to do what they need to do, and just to give up that control as well, and then have to come back later and be like, okay, so where are we at with this, and how's it going, and how can I help? And there's times where he's like, you're good. I'm like, okay.
Oh, that is such a great point. Like, and it's such a mindset right there. Like, to say, I don't have to do everything. I don't have to have full control, but really, where do I fit in that's
Mhm.
going to carry the mission or the goal forward? And, recognizing like, I really like doing this, but in my business, like, well, but this person does it better. So I'm going to let them be in charge of that. And I can pop in every once in a while, but I don't have to do it all.
Yeah, it's hard to give up control.
It is, right? I think that's something like so many people battle. And grit, if we cling and we're hanging on, like, we don't actually have to grit our teeth and bear it in order to have the grit. And when I hear grit, I think of the traction, like the
Mhm.
ability. I mean, it makes me think of uh, a meeting I was in one point, and the owner who was announcing a new project was like, here's two paths. There's a path in the forest, and it was just like a straight up dirt path that was very simple. And then there was this like winding path that had like rocks and stones. And I was like, well, if you've ever been hiking before, that slick path is actually slick and kind of sometimes harder, versus when we have this ability to step on things, to grab onto things, to travel up and have the ladder. And the stones and the challenges don't always mean that it's bad, right?
No, sometimes they're actually the perfect diversion because maybe you weren't going the right way, right? So now you had to find a little bit of a workaround to get around that stone or that path. And you're like, oh, I would have made a pretty big mistake if I went over the freaking rock instead of around it, right? So yeah, there's reasons things happen.
I agree. So coming back to, I love hearing this being intentional is something that I really truly hear what you're saying, and knowing what we want, not just all the things that we should do, right? Most of us get the corporate job, make the lots of money, and then chase it hard and ignore your body, right? Or it can be this, let me sit down and really like sit with this and see how that feels. And is that really what I want? Is that what's going to make me happy? Is that what's going to make me stick to it? And let's fast forward for a moment to like where you all are now and working with clients and managing your family. So it was a two boys.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
tell us, like, what's your day-to-day look like now? I know we were just talking about how we kind of took the summer easy, which isn't an option in corporate world.
Yeah, so we have 8, almost 9 and 11-year-old boys who are very active. And so the way it works in our house is I book everything. I make sure it's in the calendar, it's scheduled, it's paid for. I know what's coming up, what they need for whatever sports they're in or guitar. And then my husband generally is the chauffeur. So, so I take him to all these different events. And we made that work for a couple reasons. It actually was default at first because I did work corporate right downtown. I had this specific commute and everything, whereas he worked 10 minutes from our house so he could get kids from school and daycare. And then as we shifted both virtually, we reevaluated to see, like, does this still work for us? And obviously it did because I'm the detail person when it comes to planning. And I just kind of know what's coming up when and when to get it done. I think maybe that's a mom thing too. But also my husband, he's just adjusted to take his laptop on the road. So when
Mm.
he's sitting there waiting for an hour when they're in a sport, he's working away and I'm at home getting other things done. But a typical day is, yeah, the kids are off to school and we both have separate offices doing whatever it is that's in our day. We do calendarize, and that's one thing we really emphasize with
Mm.
anyone we work with is put it in your calendar and have a shared. So our calendar, we have one for him, one for me, and then our family, right? So he can see in there exactly what's going on at all times. And he knows if he's got to book something for both of us, if I'm available, it's in the calendar, right? And that took some adjusting. And people, they look at me when they're explaining some of the things. They're like, yeah, my husband doesn't know when I got to be here. I'm like, why don't you guys have a shared calendar? We're like, well, yeah, he wouldn't use it. I'm like, or he would. I'm like, you could kind of make it an agreement between the two of you, and it'd make both your lives so much easier. Then you're not having to go tell them and see if it works with the schedule. It's like, open up your phone. We all have them now, and they all sync and talk to each other. And he knows what's going on with the kids and when he's got to be gone taking the kids things and when you're going to be around. And they just look at me sometimes like I'm crazy. I'm like, try it. I promise you, it will change your life. It'll change your relationship. Because now that expectation is set, and there's no more hoping he opens the calendar or he sees what's going on, and there shouldn't be errors because he didn't know.
Right. And I think, admitting that sometimes we're defaulting back on what we think. I think so many of us, especially as women, like, we're like, oh, the woman does it all. The men don't get these things. And sometimes we do default into like old programming of what we've been taught and what we've been raised. And I imagine having these conversations though, to sit down and say like, hey, we both have similar goals. Like, how are we going to make these goals happen together? And getting that buy-in to do this work together. I mean, it's like you would with any business partner, right? And if we are running our life like a business, like, hey, I have these goals, like we want to retire, like all this wealth knowledge, like it's so important to sit down with that mentality and make sure that you are moving in the same direction. I'd love to hear like some of those key mindset shifts that you are noticing that people do need to shift out of.
I think one that we always, again, reiterate along with the calendar is actually booking. And so we teach our clients, like, put it in the calendar. So, for example, for us on Sundays, we have one for financial, one for our relationship, and one for family intention setting. And then on Monday, we have one for the business, right? And they're repeat every week at a certain time. And what that does, finance, for example, if you have anything you want to review or discuss with your partner, sometimes they don't have the space. And if you just go interrupt them, which I've done, they're not there because they're like, oh, I got this email or this phone call. Like their head's out of the game. But if it's an expectation that 10 a.m. on Sundays, we're talking finance, one, they can come prepared. Two, they can put it in the agenda instead of worrying about it midweek so you know it's going to get discussed. And three, you have that space specifically to talk about it so you can be on the same page every week. And it doesn't have to be half an hour, it could be 15 minutes. And we say, like, it's not like, how are our finances? Oh, good. No, it's like, be very specific and intentional with that time. Like if you're investing in something, take that time to review it and make sure you both understand what it is, what the plan is, who's responsible for which parts of it, right? But very, very often we just glaze over until it becomes such a hot concern that one of us blows up, and then it becomes more of an argument and not a productive conversation where you're understanding each other. And in those conversations, we also encourage asking how instead of why question. Right? So if your partner comes to you and wants to invest in, say, real estate, and it's new to you and you're like a hard no, you don't want to be like, why do you want to do that? Right? It's very accusatory. It's be like, well, how do you think that will work for us? Or how do you think we can do that? And just start getting them talking so they can explain themselves without the defenses, so you can get yourself educated on what they're thinking. So then you can get on the same page or ask questions where you don't feel you understand, or open up your side of the conversation if you have ideas around it or concerns that came up, or fears, which is a big one. Fears of loss or fears of investments or stories you've heard, and get those out into the open so you both understand where you're coming from, and not just okay, that sounds good, hun. And then really in here you're going, but my grandpa went bankrupt doing that. You know what I mean? Like, you're holding on to these, which is not going to help you long term. Eventually, they're going to creep out, and your partner is going to be like, sideswipe, like, what just happened here? You agreed to it, but did you fully agree to it? Or did you kind
Mhm.
of give it away for him to make the decision, and just now the choice is his, and you gave up your power and your choice?
Yeah. Oh, I hear two core things. I'm hearing this like curiosity, one, and approaching it with curiosity rather than like a wall. And then
Mhm,
also this openness to and being vulnerable to say these are my concerns, but and maybe listing those pros and cons. And
mhm,
just like we would, again, it like comes back to like if you were business partners, which you are in life, right? Like how would you make the decisions to grow the business, and in this circumstance growing the wealth for your personal family, and saying, okay, well, how can we do that? Do you want to take control of that? And
mhm,
I almost hear this level of fun though with curiosity, where it's like, okay, well, I don't have an answer for that yet, but let me spend the week researching, and then I'll get back to you on our next meeting, and I can, say a couple ideas I think I have of it, and keeping it light and fun, while also just going, okay, well, these are some of my concerns too. What do you think about my concerns? Like, what are your responses, and getting out of that reactive mode. Being reactive never helps anybody grow, whether it's our personal self, our family, our wealth. Being able to get to that space to be able to respond. You mentioned some amazing little nuggets there.
yeah, one thing we do with our couples clients is the assignments they do on their own, and then they come together. And if the reason we do that is because a lot of times when you're together, it's like a think tank, and you're like, oh yeah, that's good, oh yeah, that's good, oh yeah, that's good, right? But when you do it together, apart, it's just yours. So when you work on your values, which is part of ours, start on your values, and then they come together, and they'll be like, oh, I didn't know that was one of your values. And it does two things. One, it now makes your partner aware that you have that value. And two, it gives you now a space to talk about it. Because
Mm,
maybe it's not his value, but he might be totally fine with it. Like, oh yeah, I appreciate you value that. It's not maybe one of my top five, but I can understand how you value it. And then you can see where you're aligned on your values and you're not. And that plays an important role in your family, in your wealth, in like just your career, everything. But having them do it separate first and then come together gives you your space to get you out. So
mm,
once you're with your partner, sometimes it's hard to have your say, or you get nervous, or you have a fear. You're like, oh, I don't want to share that, but it's already out now. It's already on the page, right? And then of course, having us in there, we help because we're not partial to one or the other, right? It's kind of like, let's just see what it is. And one of the things we always teach when we're doing it is there's several stages when you're working through things. And one is there's the emotion, like okay,
mhm.
get it all out. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? And then the next one is like, well, let's talk about facts. Okay, you've gotten it, but it's out. Let's talk about the real facts, because a lot of times we let emotion just sidetrack us and not actually look at the facts, which can play a huge role in the outcome. And if you just put the facts and take out all emotion, it's a whole different conversation. It's
Mm,
definitely it's a muscle you got to build, a tool to learn, because we're emotional creatures. But if you could be like, oh, okay, well, you're right. I thought that just based on a story or a belief I had. But if factually that's what the evidence is, that makes sense.
yeah. Yeah. Well, and that made me think of a couple questions as you were talking about some of those. I can imagine for some people going, okay, so they work with couples, but how do they work with individuals? And the reason I ask that is I think back to my first relationship where I had several attempts to talk about money and finances with that partner, and often like we just couldn't talk about it. And I got to a point where I like no longer wanted to talk about it with him because I was planning my escape because, and I think I hear those scenarios. So twofold of like working with individuals and then working with people who maybe they don't want to mingle that world together for various reasons.
So when we work with, let's say, singles, generally they are single. um, Otherwise, we encourage to bring the couple in. And that's like, even when we do our pricing for our program, it's kind of a 2-for-1. You're going to pay the same price. So you might as well bring them in or bring her in, right? And it's not always they have to show up to everything. Sometimes, they're nervous or shy. So here's the homework. You can do it, and your partner can bring it back in, and slowly hope, we build up that confidence, that trust, so that they are on the same page, or we can at least indirectly help the partner who is more willing to be open and front center for the relationship. Because you're right, there's always a disconnect. Always, always, always. Right? Whether they know it or not, it'll come out. And so we want to help them acknowledge that. And it's okay. It's not good or bad, right or wrong. And that's what we teach. It's like, it just is. And if you accept each other for everything you are and everything you're not, it'll be such a more calm and peaceful path to go forward. Mm-hmm. Now, if you do have that defiant partner, or however you want to put it, it's a little bit of a different situation. And that could be one of two things when it comes to working with us. Like, I'm very passionate about helping women just based on a lot of the experiences I've had, of which I really had a horrible situation in my past as well. Also planning my escape. So I get it. And I still encourage and empower them to build their wealth because it can open up doors that I know I didn't have, like the freedom to get out, the freedom to get on my own, the freedom to be out of a horrible situation, even a crappy job or a horrible boss, right? Like, these are situations that sometimes we are in and we don't realize it till it's too late. And then we feel stuck because financially, like, how am I going to do it? Right? So if we can get you out of that space, then you can make a clearer decision. Because if your decision is, do I want to be here or not, versus can I financially afford to be here or not, it's a whole different conversation you can have with yourself.
Isn't it? It so is. And having this ability, like, I found at least my money journey and looking at building wealth was so much more than just money. And I'm hearing that in the things that you say as well. Like, it is getting intentional. It is planning your future. It is owning your own worth just as much as you can own your bank account. It's freedom. It's choices.
Yes.
There's so many layers of emotions that are behind this very charged topic. And so many people are like, I don't know, I don't have enough financial literacy. I don't even know where to start. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if if I'm going to get scammed out of something. And I think all of those are valid.
Yes.
But also, like, I think it's so great for them to hear this from you, because you have been in so many of these situations and you've found that empowerment, and you're doing this amazing couplepreneur adventure, and being able to hear that and how far you've came. Where has been someone that started with you who is maybe not where you were when you started this wealth adventure? What's one of these like big transformations that you've really seen?
Yeah, great question. I think some of the big ones are actually understanding that they're not on the same page with their partner, right? And when they come together and they'll be like, I had no idea. And because it's not all about money with us, right? We're talking holistically with your partner. And it might be something as simple as, like, one of them gets annoyed because he's got to take out the garbage, or like, it could be something simple like that. And we share our story because our garbage, my husband was responsible for garbage. That was just the way we started our relationship, and it would overflow and I'd be so mad. And I'd be like, how do you not see this? Like, and instead of having the conversation like I should have, I would just like let it fester. And then everything about him was wrong, right? And then finally when we had the conversation, he's like, well, I can take it out sooner, but it just wasn't a priority for him. But I didn't realize how much it annoyed me. And then when he did, he calendarized it, and our relationship was great when it came out the garbage. It sounds like the simplest thing, but yet one personality can just be like loathing, the other one just like not thinking anything of it. But once we became on the same page, it was like you take out that animosity, that anger that one partner had. Obviously, communication is key, hence part of what we do. And I had to learn that as well, because I just assumed, I'm like, how can you not see the garbage is overflowing? Like, it's pretty simple, right? But like, I just didn't pay attention. He's busy doing whatever else in his work day and stuff, and it wasn't a priority. And I was like, oh. He's like, so why don't you just ask? I'm like, what? That sounds easy. But I'm not your mother, right? So it's kind of like, well, you gotta find that balance. So that's where we come together a lot with what we call agreements. And we encourage couples to have an agreement for everything. And it's not like, okay, here's a contract with the lawyer. It's not like it's a verbal agreement in a lot of cases, like who's doing the shopping, who's doing the dishes, who's making the kids the choices on the kids and the decisions for the kids, and who's responsible for the money management, who's responsible, are you both working, what does that look like? And we cross the gamut. Your relationship, whether it's date nights, whatever your love languages are, what you need in your relationship. Because a lot of time we don't ask for what we need, especially as a female. We just think he can read our mind, and then we get mad when he doesn't, right? So it's like, if you have an agreement in place, and yes, they get broken, but we encourage you to reevaluate those agreements on a consistent basis, making sure they're still working for both of you. If they're not, throw it out, create a new agreement, or revise it, right? But so many times we live on assumptions, and those flare anger and upset and disappointment, and then we carry that on to everything else about our partners. Like, well, you didn't do this, so you're probably not doing that, and he's probably doing amazing things over here, but you're just like annoyed on this one thing, and we carry it for days or weeks. So we really bring together that agreement concept with our clients, and they love that. They're like, oh, I'm happy to know that, I love this and you're okay with that. Because sometimes it's as simple as that. They don't actually know what their partner thinks. They've just always done it, and it's default. And we encourage them to stop living in default and start making it an active choice, an active agreement. You have a say. Don't just agree. Just be like, yep, I love it. And be there in that conversation that you love it. Or if you don't agree with it, have that conversation, because your partner might not know why. And it might be a simple tweak they can do. You're both happy.
How amazing would that be? I mean, I hear so many things here of like, this is essential for any couple who plans on getting old and retiring together. I think this should be a requirement. As soon as you get married, you have to be enrolled in this and start this as soon as you get back from your honeymoon, maybe before.
Yeah.
Because I can only imagine how many relationships will be transformed, how many people will be empowered, and you know that this trickles outside of the relationship into work life, into your relationship with your parents and even your children. It's so amazing. And what I'm hearing too is like my husband and I, we've done the couples therapy programs, and some of the things that you're mentioning are things that we did in there. But I think how much more empowering it would have been if we were on this like track for a goal other than our relationship's going to get better. Like it's like we're going to build wealth and get better and stronger in the process. I think that sounds absolutely amazing. Now, in the show notes, we do have a link for a resource that you provided as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So discoverlifebydesign.ca/wealth, and you can download our free guide, which walks you through the 3 habits that keep high achieving couples from achieving their wealth.
That's amazing. I think everybody needs that. So everyone make sure that you go and you check that out. How can someone get started with working with you? Is the information on that document, or is there another better way to get in touch?
Absolutely. It's on the document or our website, Discover Life by Design, but all our social media handles are the same, Discover Life by Design. So you can find us across social media if you just have questions. And on our website, you can book a 30-minute discovery call with us as well to just see if we are a fit or if there's something we can help you with in the interim. Please book that.
Fantastic. And as we wrap up today, which I thank you so much, like I'm loving this. I'm like, oh, I need to talk to my husband and be like, honey, we need to we need to do this. But what's just the last like words of wisdom that you'd like to provide to those listening?
Yes, I love sharing that wealth is a choice. So many times we actually default and we give away our choice. And remember, not choosing is still a choice. And I don't think people realize that. They're like, oh, you just decide whether it's what you want for dinner, where you want to go on a vacation, how you want to build your wealth. If you just like, you decide, you just gave it away.
Yep.
And so then if you're not happy with their decision, whose fault is that? It's not theirs. You gave it to them. So just choose. And I promise you, the power that brings you, the empowerment of knowing you were a part of that choice is incredible.
I absolutely love that. And that's a hard lesson to learn. I think it's only once we get to a certain point in life and you're like, how did I end up here? And it's like, well, I didn't take charge. I didn't actively participate. I passively participated, which either way you choose it is a choice.
Yeah.
So there is enough. I want to conclude with there is enough for everyone to be wealthy. We can all collectively rise. Instead of making one ship get taller than the other, we can just raise the tide together. And the only way out of that is through financial literacy. The
Yes.
only way is doing the work and pushing past those money blocks and diving in head first, not tipping your toes in,
That's
like
right.
diving in and make it happen. And it's amazing how sometimes I've been in life where I'm like, I'm not making enough money to do all of that. And if you sit down, there's always a way. So if you're at that spot where you're like ready to claim your wealth, I would highly recommend to download the resource, get in touch, make that happen. It's something you won't regret.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us on the Business Growth Lab. If you have any questions, please drop those below and we will get back to you. And we hope to see you on the next episode.